Okay, I'm going to kick everything off and I'm going to get my colleague Maya to keep admitting everybody as we start. We've got a couple of minutes just covering a few UN Women admin pieces. We are running a session today on understanding procurements and tenders with myself, Jen Blandos, and with Diana from Mars. If I could just have the next slide, please. So there we are, there's myself, I'm an advisor with UN Women, and Diana is working with Mars, and she's going to jump in a second and tell you all about herself. I first of all want to apologize to everybody for the sound of my voice today. It's not the usual chipper sound that my voice is because I lost my voice for about 5 days. And today is the first day that I've actually been able to speak again. So I'm hoping it will last for the whole day. But we're going to take you through understanding procurement and tenders today. While we let people in, if we could just go to the next slide. As we say to everybody, we encourage you to please tag us on social media. Here are some of the tags from social media for both UN Women, NAMA Women Advancement, and Diana, and also myself as well. If you want to take any screen grabs or pictures of the session or share what you're learning today, we absolutely love to hear that from you as well. So please do. We can have the next slide. Couple of housekeeping bits that I just want to share with you. One is that our partner Shira is looking for 4 F&B concepts and 4 retail homegrown brands to set up their new business in Al Mamsha, which is a new destination in Sharjah. You can go onto the Shira website and you'll be able to get more details to be able to apply for that competition. Still open. And the next slide is as well as just to remind you also that the UN Women list for women-owned businesses is still open. If you are a women-owned business, which means that you're 51% female-owned and controlled, or more than 25% women-owned if you have a local partner, it's a great opportunity for you to get listed because UN Women does share this with a number of companies who are looking to hire women-owned businesses as part of the procurement process. And Diana and I will speak about that later as part of today's presentation as well. If we could go to the next slide. Now, before we kick off today, I would like to know how knowledgeable everybody is in terms of procurement and tendering. We're just going to launch a little poll, and I would love to have your feedback just so it can give us a bit of an understanding about where we are and how we're starting with today's session. And while we do that, I need a bit of hot tea to keep me going. Okay, so we've got a lot of people have no knowledge, more than 50% are about average, and we have a few who say that they have good knowledge from doing procurement and tendering. So while you're finishing off that poll, if we could just go on to the next slide. And I would like to introduce you to Diana. We are absolutely delighted to have Diana joining us here today. It's so nice when we talk about things such as procurement and tendering that you are able to get the company perspective. And Diana is going to introduce herself and then kick off today's session.
Yes, thanks a lot, Jen, and thank you so much to UN Women and NAMA for this amazing masterclass. I'm very happy to be here today to support all women entrepreneurs. I'm hoping that we can bring to you more knowledge about procurement. So I am a certified supply chain professional. I've been working in procurement for more than 10 years in FMCGs. I worked for British American Tobacco in Beirut, for Procter & Gamble in Beirut as well. And moving to Dubai, I worked with 2 tech companies. I worked with Noon.com and Kareem, where I supported the establishment of their procurement department, from processes to systems, etc. And now I'm working for Mars GCC. It's the chocolate company. not the planet. And I actually I'm supporting them with category management. So anything around marketing and sales, I am doing the strategic sourcing for that, for Middle East and Africa. Thank you so much, Jen.
And actually, just as you moved the slide, Diana, I just wanted to say for anybody who hasn't taken part in a UN Women session before, I'm sure you are going to have lots and lots of questions. And please do put them in the chat box, and I will interrupt Diana throughout the session to ask her the questions. But if I could ask you to please keep yourself muted. And also, all the UN Women sessions are non-promotional. So if I could ask you as well to please not be promoting your business and sharing your contact details, because that's not the purpose of today's session. Right, so we have a new poll that we are going to ask you. And this is, we would like to know if you have actually registered your business before. So just going to launch this poll, and if you could let us know, because this will really help us determine our discussion this morning as well. Okay, so we've got a pretty even split, it's looking like. There are a few people as well who found that the whole process was maybe a little bit too complicated as well. Just give everybody a few more seconds to go and answer that. Okay, so it's Diana, it's looking like it's a pretty even split, with a few people saying as well that it was maybe a bit too complicated, so they decided not to go through with it as well.
Yeah. So I'll take it from here, Jen. So basically, what we wanted to talk to you today about is the procurement process, how it goes in an FMCG company, such as, you know, Mars and or other companies. What do we usually do, and what does it mean for you as well, so that you understand the background, but also, you know, when we launch a tender or something, what are the steps? So first of all, let me give you some background. So basically, there are at companies what we call budget owners or stakeholders. So we have, like myself, I am the procurement person responsible or supporting the marketing and sales functions. So those two functions, they own the budgets. What they do is they review at the beginning of the year, they have like a budget set for the year. And this is when actually they come to us with expressing a need. And this is when actually we go out to market as procurement professionals to get to answer to this need, whether it's a product or a service or anything around that. So basically, what do we do with those budget owners and stakeholders? We request from them to prepare their requirements sheets or documents, you know, and when preparing those documents, what we have in the back of our minds, and it should be part also of those documents, are the criteria, what we call assessment criteria or selection criteria when it comes to, you know, any requirement for the company. And there are different types of how we send out those requirements. So either if it's a simple, let's say, product that is very, has a specific specs, we launch what we call a request for a quotation. In this case, we know what we want. For example, a Samsung TV. It's not a promotion, just an example. So let's say we want this. So we know that this is what we're looking for. Therefore, this is what we launch. It's a request for a quotation document that has, you know, specs and requirements and quantities, and when do we need it, or timelines and all that. There is another type, which is the request for a proposal. And in this case, it's a more extensive request. It comes as, you know, an idea. So we request from the outside world a proposal for the need that we have within the company. I can give you an example. If I am working for a marketing, let's say, need, if it's a creative agency, in this case, we go out with this RFP document, and this is the acronym for it, request for proposal, where we mention what type of creative idea we want, what are we trying to promote for in the company. If it's a chocolate, for example, it's Mars or any other. So we put the details about this need, and we also mention what would be the criteria we're going to be assessing the responses we receive from the suppliers that are participating. All right, and there is something much more bigger, if I would say. It's called a tender, and in this case, this tender, why is it different than an RFP? An RFQ, it's usually the timeline. So usually it's something that takes a longer time for the assessment. It entails many more people that participate in the assessment and all that. And what I wanted to mention to you is that when we launch something like that, so there is definitely in the document the assessment, but also we mention the committee. If it's a big requirement, then there is a committee that is formed within the company that reviews the proposal so that we avoid subjectivity, so that it remains objective. All right, I'll move unless Jen somebody has questions, or I need to stop here. So now, how do we look? Today, I have a need. I formed my, my document where I mentioned the need. I detailed it. I put a lot of details about what we're looking for, how we're going to assess, who are the people that are assessing. Then we move to looking for who are we going to invite. In FMCGs, usually it is a private invitation. So how do we look for suppliers? There are many ways. First thing, we look at our own pool that we formed throughout the years through similar types of, RFQs and RFPs. So what we do is we have two types here of in our pool of suppliers. We have suppliers that we call preferred, and with those suppliers, we usually have a contract or a rate card that is signed. And those are suppliers to whom we go directly without the need to go through this process, unless we're doing a benchmarking exercise. The approved suppliers are suppliers that actually participated before in an RFP or an RFQ that actually succeeded maybe to get one-off. So we didn't need to go through a contract signature with them. However, they got a one-off job. If I'm talking about an RFQ, maybe, like I said, a Samsung TV, somebody who was able to provide this TV fast, good price, the right specs in the past. So we managed to register them and they became approved. So again, it's a one-off relationship without any contract, but those people are already registered in the system. So we dig in there. And we do also research, online research. So we do use like Google search or LinkedIn to look for businesses that are, available, that can respond to the need we're having. And why LinkedIn or Google? Because on those searches, we are in some countries, of course, not all the countries have this capability to give us information about the participants, but we usually look at the background. What do they have in terms of information on there? Do they have a website? Do they have a portfolio profiles, etc.? So we do some kind of due diligence ahead. So before inviting the suppliers to participate. And there is also direct contact. So people who reached out to us through, maybe they know somebody in the company, they send their profile, or somebody, for example, participating worked with them in the past. So we do include them. However, again, we do some kind of due diligence there. And then the invitation is launched. And this invitation, when we launch it, there are two means of launching an invitation. Whether we decide to do it offline, so through an email invitation, and again here it's a private invitation, so we'd only send it to the people who we selected and decided that will be part of this process, or we launch it online through the system. At Mars, for example, I can tell you that we use SAP, and we have an e-sourcing tool within this SAP system that helps us first, register or get the suppliers to register themselves on the system, and then they are capable to respond to the tender information or to the RFP in this system. It's very important to be tech savvy if you're going to be dealing with companies, FMCGs that are using this kind of e-sourcing. It's not rocket science. It's a simple system. Sometimes it can be a bit complicated. However, I know for a fact that our team, we have a special team that is dedicated to support suppliers in case they have questions about this registration process. I would say at Mars today, we have 50% of our tenders launched through emails and 50% through the system. So it really depends what we're doing and the type or the nature of this invitation. I'm gonna move again. If you have any questions, I can stop and answer. Now, when we launch this invitation for tendering, the first step for us is the most important one. If it's a new supplier, you need to sign what we call a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. So this is an agreement that is protecting you and us, so both sides, both parties, from any disclosure of the information that we are sharing with you, or that we are going to disclose the information that you share with us with others. So this is to protect both parties. Now, there are two types of NDAs. Some companies, they use a lot of unilateral, which means we are just asking you to not to disclose anything. And we don't actually, have the same obligation. However, the bilateral is the mostly used at Mars, because Mars is a company that respects a lot mutuality. So we usually, most of the time, we sign bilateral agreements unless it's a very critical type of information, or like we're getting a software that is written specifically for us. So in this case, this is not going to be bilateral. Most of the cases, like I said, at Mars, we sign bilateral non-disclosure agreements. Now, I want to mention something that's very important. Part of this document, the RFP or the tender, we mention timelines. So timeline to respond to the NDA, a deadline, a deadline to respond to the RFP. All of these is what I call the most important parts, along with, of course, the proposal, because there is some kind of etiquette there. I want to mention a few things that we expect as companies from the suppliers. First of all, always answer that you have received the invitation and make sure you respect the deadlines. So it's very important that those timelines are put in there for a reason, because there is always like some kind of backward engineering about the time you would need this service or product. So it's very important to respect those timelines. And also, in all the RFPs, we have a time we set for Q&A. So if there is any questions, etc. So please make sure you respect those timelines. It's important that you don't start, connecting with the team on an ad hoc basis, because the people who are involved in the RFP they have specific also time for each task. So it's important to respect that. And in case of delay, so in case you won't be able to respond for some reason, you need more time to review the NDA or anything, make sure to inform the procurement person who invited you, inform them about the need, explaining the requirement for extension. And believe me, sometimes it's possible. So it's not always written in stone. I would say it's important to mention if you need more time, rather than being late without, mentioning that, because it can be one of the reasons for you to be out of this RFP. Now, again, I'll move unless there are any questions. So when we talk about the assessment call, so there in the timelines, when you are invited, you will see there are first, the NDA, you need to send it on a certain date. Then the RFP document will be launched to you. So you receive the information, you have enough time to review and respond and prepare, and you have time also to answer any questions that you might have. Then we get to what we call assessment calls. It could be calls or presentation. You can come to offices to present, or it can be through a call, but there will be some time for you to present, what you have prepared. And in this case, so basically first you respond to a questionnaire or a type of a proposal online or through an email, but then make sure you prepare a summary, some kind of a summary presentation that talks about all the points that you were asked to do, and that is straight to the point, and be prepared to answer questions during the assessment calls. So when you are invited to present, we usually give a certain time for the presentation and then for questions. So just make sure you are ready when it comes to those, and you bring the right people into the meeting to answer, because it could be you need your finance person or an IT person, or it depends really on what we're talking about here. And then when it comes to the decision time, so basically, usually we get also some time to reunite as a committee from the company side. We review the proposals based on the presentations we received. We also assess, and put some kind of scoring. It's really an assessment. And then when the decision comes, you will be receiving an email either through the system or directly from the procurement professional that you're successful or not, and what will be the next steps. In case you are not successful, make sure to request feedback, and please make sure to keep this etiquette we talked about, keep the professionalism, because it's important that you understand once you have been invited and shortlisted to come or get an assessment, and you are in the minds of those people who you dealt with, the way you deal with with any feedback is very important. And the way you deal with being not successful is also very important, because it gives you the chance to participate another time. All right.
Diana, I have a couple of questions for you. Maybe if you just want to move back the slide before we move into talking about the SME perspective. But one person has asked, how do suppliers that don't have existing relationships with the companies find these types of tenders? Are there any central sites that we can find tenders on?
Really, because here, it's a very good question, by the way. I'm talking about FMCGs, and usually FMCGs, as I said at the beginning, we have private tenders and private, so it's not public. So we don't really launch those tenders on any website. It's about how do you hear about it? It's really making yourself visible, I would say, to those companies through LinkedIn, connecting. If you are interested to work with a certain company, make sure you connect with the procurement people. Attend forums where you are, you get to know companies and what do they do. And as I said, we do research, the need in the markets, depending where we are, through LinkedIn, through a Google search. If there is any forum where you are, registered, then we, as a company, if we have access to this forum, we go and look for suppliers there. So I would really say make yourself visible. That's very important, and try to connect as much as you can with the procurement people and the companies you're interested to work with.
Excellent. And another question was, in the UAE, a lot of people talk about how you need a DED license to work with government clients. Do large companies like Mars also have similar requirements?
We don't have DED requirements in specific. However, when you work with companies like Mars, I would say you need to have your documents in place. I think Jennifer is going to cover this in the coming slides. So you need to understand that once you are invited, you need to be ready with all the required documents. You need to have a proper corporate bank account. You need to be a registered company, basically, to be able to work with multinational companies. We will talk about the documentation, what do you need to have, but not all companies, require specific registration, such as, the public ones.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, there's a few slides that I want to talk about just from an SME perspective, from my experience of owning businesses for more than 20 years. In your company, you should have a file on your computer or on your server or your Dropbox or wherever you're keeping your documents that has all of your statutory documents together, because it will make it so much easier for you to be applying for those tenders. And these are the typical things that you will always be asked for. So for example, your trade license, your VAT registration certificate, a letter verifying your bank account, and also a copy of the owner's ID. And that's typically the Emirates ID, Visa passport, and power of attorney if that person's name doesn't sit on the trade license. Those are the standard ones. 100% you will always be asked for by procurement. However, if we look at the next slide, there's a big long list of other ones which you might get asked for as well. And if you don't happen to have these, it would be useful, especially if you start to plan on applying for bigger tenders and proposals, to have these on file. So for example, everybody should have the Articles of Association for their business, an establishment card. Sometimes as well, you get asked to have a membership in the Chamber of Commerce. If you have a mainland license, that's given to you automatically. If you have a free zone license, you typically have to pay a separate fee to join the Chamber of Commerce. Sometimes as well, to register you, they will also ask you for copies of your insurance. So they will want to know that you have a number of different types of insurance, and they will have different requirements depending upon what the project is that you're bidding for. You oftentimes as well will get asked for company policies. So for example, your environmental policy or your ESG policy, which stands for environmental, social, and governance, health and safety, anti-bribery or money laundering, a number of those different policies. Now, and I'm sure as well that as entrepreneurs, you're sitting there looking, but I only have 2 people or 5 people working for my business. Why would we have a health and safety policy? Unfortunately, these are some of the requirements by companies that they are looking for. And so it's a good habit to get into that. And also one of those processes that are useful to have as a business to help you grow. And in a number of sessions that we're going to do later, we're going to be talking about systems and processes to get in place for growth. Other areas you might be asked for would be profiles, biographies of key staff and management are often asked. Also, you sometimes might get asked for a list of key clients or customers, and also potentially suppliers, case studies or profiles of work that you've done. And in some cases as well, you might get asked for audited accounts. And I have had a number of tenders in my years where I've been asked for audited accounts and you have to create them. So we have a couple of questions. So one person says, what about solopreneurs? Are they expected to have such policies documented? Now, there's a few different things, because if you're applying as a freelancer, then there will typically be a different set of requirements because you have a different license. However, if you have a free zone LLC or an LLC, even if you are the only person working in that company, there will be the expectation that you will have those policies as well. So there's a good question that says, how do I create these policies? You don't have to pay somebody to create them for you. It can be a simple policy, but it talks about your company's commitment to how you're going to manage that. So if you look on the internet, and Google is always a great place to go and look, you will find a number of policies that will be examples that you would be able to go and take these and then go and rewrite them and have them for your business. I know when I was creating them in early days for my business, I paid for an HR service, and the HR service actually provided it to me where they had a number of templates, and then I changed them for the information for my business. Okay, Diana, over to you again. Oh, actually, quick poll. I want to know how many of you have your key documents that you need on your system. I'm just going to pop open that poll. Give me 1 second. There we go. So it's great to see about half of the people do have everything on file, which will make it so much easier as well to do. But we do have maybe a little less than half who don't, or who have some documents and not all. This is one of those things that as you start to build and grow your business, that these are really key tools to have in place. Now, we've also been asked, for example, about insurance. What sort of insurance would a creative agency be expected to have? Again, it really depends on the company. So for example, the company or the entity, for example, I've been asked for workmen's compensation, public liability, sometimes specific insurance policy for that specific project that my business has been working on. It really depends upon what you're doing. And also sometimes as well that these can be negotiated. And I think we'll have a bit more of a conversation because Diana is really representing the perspective from a FMCG, a fast-moving consumer goods company like Mars. But then there's also other government entities and companies that might have slightly different rules as well. So for example, somebody said some tenders might request for bonds specifically for government tenders. Yes, Diana, I believe that within Mars, you don't request for bonds, do you?
No, exactly. Like I wanted to mention that. So basically, as Mars in FMCG in general, we don't require that many documentation. I would say the process is a bit more complicated when you talk with a governmental entity, or so the requirements might be much more extensive. From my perspective, when I talk, for example, about creative agency, we don't usually ask for an insurance, to see their insurance card. However, it's important for us to look at their, the background. We look for references. It's something I wanted to mention. What we usually do, if it's a company that we deal with for the first time, we ask sometimes for references. So, contacts or customers they've dealt with before, that we can have a call with and see, the way they were, the way they were dealing or doing business. So if we don't really need all the documents that Jennifer mentioned. However, I think those are important for you to keep in mind, like Jen said, because if you're going to grow your business at a certain point, you'll be dealing with different types of companies, and some companies require more documents than others.
And it just makes it easier when you are applying for a tender, because if you don't have these already available, that it's going to take you extra time to do it, which is why I've found it's been a really good habit that I've gotten into since early days, that I have that folder on my server where I pull up all the documents that are needed for a tender. Some require fewer documents, some require very detailed, intensive documents, and it really depends on what tender you're applying for. And yes, as somebody pointed out, sometimes the government contracts can be a lot more complicated, and especially some around the GCC region as well, not only within the UAE.
Shall I move? So basically, there is a question about how are you sourced. So it's very important for you guys to have, like we said before, we're maybe repeating some of these, but it's very important that you make yourself visible, on search engines. It could be, by putting your profiles up on LinkedIn, or making sure you are visible on Google search. And there are some kind of relationships you can establish with Google, for example, to get make your companies more visible. I'm sure you're aware of that. Ensure you have the needed documents. So I would say, if I'm gonna make it a bit simpler, the basics, the base documents that you need to have, at least to start a relationship with, let's say, an FMCG, are your trade license, your bank details on the letterhead of the bank, signed by the bank, the POA, like we mentioned before, the profiles of your owners, ensuring that you have the right, VAT documents, VAT certificate, VAT, if you are registered. So it's important to have like the basics, and from there, whatever requirement you have, depending on who you are applying with, is also important. So start building this database as you go. Of course, have your portfolio ready, your company background, all the needed documents, and enhance your network. And by this we mean, make sure you attend, those networking events where, like the Meet the Buyer one that we've done a few weeks ago. It's important that you guys get, aligned or in touch with those kinds of forums where you are visible, or you become more visible. Now, I'm going to move to something that is, let's say, you won this tender, and now you're moving to deepen this relationship with the company. We as companies, if it's a certain value of relationship, we usually go to contracts. So we sign a contract or a rate card, but it's always attached, and there are always terms and conditions. Even if it's only a purchase order, there are terms and conditions that are attached to a purchase order that we advise you here to read. We said, make sure to read all the terms and conditions very carefully, because those are binding terms and conditions that govern this relationship. In case something happens, there will be a dispute to be resolved, then those are the terms that we look at that are signed by both parties. So it's important, the moment also you accept a purchase order, you need to be aware that you are also accepting the terms and conditions attached to it. So make sure to read carefully those terms and conditions. And here we try to mention a few that are important, and why. I'm going to mention to you why we think they are important for you to look at and try to negotiate. I am the procurement person telling you negotiate with us. So it's important to keep that in mind. First of all, the cancellation policy. So in case there is a certain cancellation for any reason, you need to understand that there are, obligations that arise from this cancellation. Make sure to read this very carefully and understand your obligation, and also protect yourself by adding, some kind of terms that will protect this relationship in case the cancellation is from the suppliers, from the company side. Penalties for delays. We as companies always ensure that we have those kinds of penalties, because any delay will affect our business. So basically, we're going to you for this requirement because we need it at a certain time. Therefore, there will be some penalties. Make sure to understand those penalties. And if you feel they are too harsh or too, strong, then make sure to negotiate those. For example, in Mars, we always have a termination for convenience. Here, what is negotiable in such case? What is the termination for convenience first? Let me just tell you that. It's when a company has the right to terminate a contract or a relationship before the end of the term of this contract, just because it is not convenient for them anymore. All right, so it's for any reason, not only breach, which means that this, entails risk on your side. You need to be careful about the notice period there. If there is a termination for convenience, then give yourself time in this notice period that is given by the company to you to ensure you find an alternative or think about mitigation. So this notice period is something you can negotiate, and in some cases you can also negotiate this termination clause out. But in all cases, there's the termination for breach that will remain. All right, it's important to keep that in mind. The term of the contract, of course, this is something you can negotiate. Look at that. I mean, does it work for you 1 year? Would it make more sense for you to have a 2-year contract to cover your expenses? In some cases, you would be doing some kind of investment at the beginning. Would this term cover your investment? Make sure to be aware of that and understand how to negotiate that as well. SLAs and KPIs, same thing. So the SLA is the service level agreement, and KPIs is the key performance indicators. So those two things are what we put in place as companies to ensure we get the service level that we need. Okay, so we put some kind of deliverable that we need you to be ensuring all throughout the term of the contract. And the key performance indicators are the indicators that we use to assess the relationship throughout the term of the contract. Dispute resolution jurisdiction. So it means make sure to understand where is the jurisdiction of this dispute resolution. In the UAE, for example, we have the IFC. Do you have capability in case of a dispute to actually, how do you say it, negotiate this kind of dispute and ensure you get the rights or your rights covered and protected? And again, the insurance policies. Sometimes we request insurance to be covered part of the contract. Make sure you understand what does it mean for you, and you have the right insurance policies in place. What do you need to be aware about? So to be careful about are payment terms. does, because sometimes payment terms can be very strong. In some cases for us, for example, at Mars, we're looking at SMEs and ensuring we, make our payment terms less hard on them. So in general, our standard payment terms at 120 days. However, with the SMEs, we're currently doing an exercise reviewing those payment terms and ensuring we lower them down to make sure we are mutual and not to harm the businesses. So payment terms are very important. Tax liability. If you're doing a cross-borders dealing, ensure that you understand. If you are, for example, invoicing a company that's in Saudi, if you're in the UAE, then there is what we call withholding tax that could be pretty high. It could be up to 15%. Make sure you understand the liability on the tax front, and not to sign anything before taking this into account in in the costs that you have provided. If the contract is very big, you do not hesitate to engage a lawyer, because in some cases contracts can be very heavy to read. And if you're not a lawyer, it's not easy to understand all the obligations and terms. So don't hesitate to hire a lawyer if you got a big contract in place. And please read before signing again and again. In some cases, we get also this sometimes, like some people change some clauses before sending for signature. So make sure you have, the final version as you compare and read this and before signing anything.
Can we go back to that slide, Diana, before we launch the poll? Okay, these last two slides are really important, and I want to spend a bit more time talking about it, and people have a few different questions as well. So these are things as well that you need to be aware of that can be potential risks, but also it gives you the possibility for negotiation. So for example, payment terms, as Diana said, 120 days is what's standard for them, but you're being much more flexible with SMEs. And I think you're looking at 30 to 60 days, and maybe even sometimes advance payment as well, depending upon who you're dealing with. And this is one thing I wanted to say to people, looking at 20 years of experience of negotiating with contracts, is that your payment terms are very much up for negotiation, and they're not going to change their minds and not choose you, but you need to find a way to negotiate it where it's going to be win-win for everyone. So typically I will, as a small business, I would always have asked for payment in advance, because, I'm hoping that I can get payment in advance. They might come back and say 60 days. I might come back and say, okay, I want 50% in advance, 50% 30 days on payment. And you can negotiate different things like that. So don't be afraid to negotiate your payment terms, because cash flow, when you're running a small business, cash flow is super, super, super important. And it could be very damaging to you, especially if it's a large contract, if you are without the funds and you're having to pay upfront to go and deliver that service or that product. The other thing as well is tax liability and cross-border dealings. And these are two things that you need to be very careful of when you're dealing, especially with customers in different countries, that there are potential tax ramifications for you. And I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, we can forget that, because people are like, oh, there's no tax in the UAE except for VAT, we don't need to worry. But for example, in Saudi Arabia, if you have a contract in Saudi Arabia, they put a 15% withholding tax on that. Even if you were delivering the service or the product here in the UAE, if your invoice is going to a company in Saudi Arabia, they have to go and take 15% tax off. The same thing, other countries, for example, Kenya, I think, Diana, you and I were saying, I think it's about 28% in Kenya. The withholding tax is quite stringent. So you need to be very careful when you're putting together your proposals and responding to requests for proposals and tenders, that one of your terms is that it does not include any taxes. You need to make sure that that is very clear, because if not, you might think, well, of course, this is just my fee. but the company might look at that and go, oh no, that's your fee including taxes. So you need to make sure that you have a clause within your terms that says that that does not include any taxes or withholding taxes as well. Anything to add to that, Diana?
No, I wanted to say that, you know, from my perspective, I shouldn't be telling you this, but I mean, it's very important that you guys are aware of this. It's really something that created problems in the past for us as a company as well. So be careful about this and ensure you always check the tax liabilities in the countries that you are selling to, if you are capable to sell to some, you know, companies outside your, you know, your jurisdiction or your country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also want to talk about lawyers, because I think people try to read contracts and do contracts by themselves and won't be willing to go and pay a lawyer. And it depends upon the size of your contract. Okay, if it's 10,000 dirhams, that's one thing. But if you are looking at maybe 500,000, 1 million dirhams or more, that it is worth your investment to pay the couple thousand dirhams or 5,000 dirhams, whatever it might be, for a lawyer to go and review that contract, because you want them to identify where there might be any potential problems that might come up for the delivery of that contract. It's really, really important to do. And do always read. And as Diana said, read again, even if you've asked for a few changes. I've had it happen where I have asked for changes to be made in the contract. And then when I've actually gone and read through the contract again, I've noticed that they made other changes, whether that was deliberately or other departments had done it, because oftentimes contracts are being reviewed by 3, 4, 5 people at the same time. And on another point of that as well is that someone was asking, is the jurisdiction, if the jurisdiction is Dubai courts, can you ask to change it to DIFC? You can ask, and Dubai courts, DIFC courts, and ADGM courts are seen as ones that are easier to use because they have arbitration and they have small claims courts, and it's very affordable to go and get a decision. However, sometimes, for example, you might not be so lucky and the company might insist that it has to be their local courts. I always try. I think, you know, the worst that they're going to say to you is no. I had a contract one time that was in a different country, and I was working with them and I said, no, I want DIFC courts. And they came back and said, no, you're delivering the work here. It needs to be these courts. And that is something that you need to take as a risk, and you need to decide if that risk is going to be worth doing it. But it is always easier to have ADGM and DIFC courts. We have another question that says, once a company moves to contract negotiation, does it mean that they're not negotiating with another supplier as well to see which one will agree on a better, in the company's prospective contract? So I guess she's saying, are you negotiating with 2 companies at the same time to see who you can get the better deal from, and then you'll choose that company?
Yeah, that's a great question, by the way. There are some cases where we actually do share the contract during the final stages of the selection, because in some cases that's true. The contract can be a take it or break it. It can be a deal breaker. So we do that. It depends really on what we are negotiating, but we do not usually do a lot of negotiations on the contract. In the case where we're using it as one criteria for the selection, we would actually be just asking for how flexible is the company that we have sent the contract to accept the terms as is, and that would be, you know, used as you know, as I said, as a selection form. So I would say this is very rare, because usually the negotiation even of the terms of the contracts are very lengthy, and it's a process that takes a lot of time. So we don't have the luxury of time in most cases in the companies to negotiate the same contract with 2 different people and come up with a final agreement. Basically, it's going to be the final person who is selected So the final company that we select to work with, we would be sharing our contract form and we would be negotiating the terms with them only. But it's a great question, because in some cases, yeah, we do use this at before the final stages.
Thank you, Diana. I just want to see. There's been fewer questions on this because it's quite detailed. I don't think I see any other questions. There was one question at the very beginning that asked, what are common e-sourcing platforms and where can they find information?
Yeah, I would say for multinationals, usually the common ERP systems that we use are either Oracle or SAP. But I know that there are many other, different softwares that are used. I would say the essence of those platforms are similar. It's just, maybe the interface would be different. But basically the information that you guys will need to fill in are more or less the same on all those softwares. So basically it's going to be, you're going to have to register your company on the software, so to be able to participate. And once you have registered your company, then you will go into the system and you will see the questionnaire, sort of a questionnaire where you have to answer. And why is the system easier or better for companies to use? It's because it makes it more streamlined. So that reminds me of something that I wanted to mention, by the way, Jen. When you are answering an RFP, and there is a certain, certain sequence of information requested in this document, make sure you answer using the same sequence. Why is that? Because as you know, a procurement person or the committee that is assessing, they receive many proposals. If they are not able to compare apple to apple, to make it more difficult for them to take your proposal into consideration. So the more you respect the sequence and the flow of the RFP, the more your proposal would be standing out, and it would be easier for the assessors to look at and understand it. And the same way, why this e-sourcing system is easier is because it respects the sequence. It makes you actually respect the sequence, because it is built in a way where you will be answering as per the required sequence, and the system itself would be presenting to the assessors the answers side to side to make it visible and easy to process.
Yeah, and that's really important to understand when you are filling in your response to tenders, that you follow the instructions, because a lot of times tenders get disqualified because people haven't followed instructions. And one of the easiest way, well, not the easiest ways, but one of the ways that will help you win a tender is if you follow the instructions. Exactly. Provide them with the information that they want, even if it is not exactly the way that you would deliver it, that there's oftentimes opportunities where you can present an alternative solution, but you need to be able to go and answer it the way that they asked for it. Okay, we have a question regarding costs. When I'm calculating a quotation, is it good business practice to take into account the time we spent preparing the quotation or proposal and negotiation time, etc.? Do the companies require a breakdown of the price or just one overall cost generally? I want to answer that, but I want to hear your view first.
Yeah. So it's a great question again. So basically, I'll tell you something. When you are, I did a training once, and it was talking about the cost to answer to a proposal or to participate to a tender that companies are, they entail. So there is a cost that is on you guys when you are participating. However, if you will build in this cost into your quotes or the quotation that you share, you will not be actually giving yourself a chance to be more competitive, because most companies, they have this as part of their structure where they are ready and they know that they will be answering, tenders and proposals, and their cost structure is usually excluding that, because this is something they need to bear as a company, because it's part of the doing business, On top of that, yes, about the breakdown, yes, we do require the breakdown of the cost in most times. As you know, I'm talking from FMCG perspective or multinational perspective. What we work with our suppliers is what we call transparency. We expect full transparency on the costing, and because of the mutuality concept that we have in place, so the win-win mindset, we always ensure that the business we're dealing with is actually making profit, not losing money, but there is importance of being transparent and sharing the breakdown. So
yeah, okay. So to add to that, when you have a business, you have to invest a certain amount of your time in new business. And that new business cost is typically something that you hope that you will make back because you're going to win the business. But as Diana said, if you go and price all of that time that you spent working on that, that it will probably make you uncompetitive compared to other potential suppliers as well. So it's one of those things that when you run a business, we have to do new business. And that is one of the costs of doing business. Now, was there one other question with that as well? No. Okay. Anybody else have a question about costs? We've got the procurement lady here to answer all your questions in case you wanted to know. While we're waiting for people to ask more questions, one thing I wanted to talk about is somebody mentioned previously they wanted to know about performance bonds and bid bonds. And those are typical more for government entities or governments rather than private or companies in general. And typically, if you, in the areas that our entrepreneurs are operating in, you shouldn't necessarily be asked to go and provide a performance bond or a bid bond. Unfortunately, sometimes you still get asked that. And what I do find from experience is when you get asked for that, it's oftentimes people, they're following a template for procurement that they've done for large scale projects. And so if you question that, oftentimes that they will potentially look at that and review that. For example, I had a tender and the value was under 1 million dirhams, and they asked for a bid bond and they asked for a performance bond. And they had contacted me and asked me to bid for the project. And I went back to them and I said, thank you very much, but we're not doing it. We're not going to take part if you require a bid bond and a performance bond. Not going to do it. And in the end, they went back to their management and they got approval because I justified to them why they didn't need a performance bond or a bid bond because it wasn't necessary for the work that was being done. And senior management signed off on it, and that requirement was removed from the tender. And so you are able, you can negotiate on everything. The worst that they're going to say is no, but if you can, if you see that there's an opportunity to do that, absolutely go for it, because bid bonds and performance bonds are an absolute pain to organize as well. So if you don't need it, I would recommend that you negotiate and try to get them to waive that. So we've got a question about pricing. As someone who hasn't worked with large companies, how do I know if I'm pricing myself too low? Is there a negative point counted against me if I happen to price myself too low? Well, Diana's answering that. Can you also go and write in the chat box what kind of area or industry your business is in? Because I want to comment about that as well. But Diana, I'd like your feedback.
So I would say it's important that you do your own benchmarking, okay, of the service or the products that you are selling in a market. It's important that you understand the market pricing for and it's easy, like we said, there are many ways for us to know today in today's world with the access to information online and a lot of things that you guys can do. There are even companies that provide benchmarking knowledge about your goods or services, to be able to understand how you're pricing or how to level or put yourself when it comes to pricing, and make sure you are how do you say it, you are your price is actually covering all your costs. You know, it's important that you cover yourself and protect yourself when it comes to that. And in some cases, I want to give you like maybe some hints. So basically, I would say benchmarking. That's very important to know where to put yourself, but also some hints about, you know, how to make sure your costs are competitive in this world where, you know, as I said, we have access to everything. So as procurement managers, we are always compelled, you know, to know the market, to know the pricing, to know what's happening around us, to understand the components of certain of the prices that we're getting, to go into the details. And I would say, make sure you, if you are getting, let's say for your service, third party, negotiate with your third party, with the suppliers that you have, negotiate the costs and ensure that you are getting also and benchmarking those costs. Do your own procurement exercises to be able to get, you know, to the right level of pricing and stay competitive.
Okay, I have a couple of points on that SME perspective.
Yeah.
One, and I'm not saying that Mars does this because you probably don't, but there, and I'm sure other people who have done proposals or tenders in this session have probably heard this as well, that it's quite a typical thing in this part of the world that you will submit a proposal, other companies will submit a proposal, and then the procurement person will come back and say, we've analyzed everyone else in the market, and your pricing is 50% higher than everybody else's. We want a discount. And the first time that that happened to me, I was like, what? You know, if I went 50% lower, I wouldn't make any profit. I would be at a loss. I would basically be delivering this for free. I want to hear your view on that. And then I will tell you what I've been told as well.
Yeah. So listen, I'll tell you something. And here I'm being very honest. I'm not talking as a procurement person. I'm talking as an advisor to this group of women that I consider myself part of. So I would say, yes, in some cases, the procurement, we have some tactics when it comes to negotiation, all right? And it's good for everybody to actually, you know, do some kind of negotiation, maybe classes or something to understand how it goes. In negotiation, we usually aim higher than where we want to land. And in the mind of the negotiator, there is always a point where they are okay. You know, for example, if we come and tell you your price is 50% higher, it means we are more or less willing to pay, let's say, 25% more than what we're saying. All right. So basically, I think there are two things here. Either really your price is higher, and in some cases, when we come and give those kinds of feedback, it's because we have on the table much more competitive pricing. And here it's really about whether we're comparing apple to apple. So it's an SME versus, you know, a large company. In this case, the large company would have more leverage when it comes to costing because they have, you know, maybe much better, the economies of scale, basically. So they have much better deals. They get their costs down. That's why I said at the beginning, when you're benchmarking, ensure that you also negotiate your costs and make sure you are paying the right level for the, you know, components of the service or the product that you are providing. This is more or less my answer. I would say there is sometimes it's a bluff, and you need to understand that. And in other cases, if it's not a bluff, it means that there is something you need to be reviewing. You need to be sure, basically, when you're giving a quotation, make sure that you are confident about this price that you're putting. Don't overdo it. Make sure you are reasonable. At the same time, you know, as I said, benchmark to understand where you stand.
Yeah. And that's why it's really important, as you said, to benchmark and to know what other people are charging within the industry. Because I'm going to tell you a story. I had this happen to me almost 20 years ago, and it was my first big contract, and I was so excited about it. And I had precisely costed it, knew what the market was, costed everything perfectly. I had agreed everything with the team who I was going to be delivering the contract for. And then they were like, okay, great, procurement's going to be in touch. They'll give you the contracts to sign. We're going to start in a couple of weeks. And then the procurement people contacted me, and he was like, I want a 50% discount. And I was like, I had a heart attack. I was in tears. I thought, oh my God, this contract that is going to make my business, all of a sudden, I'm being asked to give a 50% discount, which would be basically me paying them to work for them. That's not possible. And I called the guy who was who had organized all of it with us, and I said, I don't understand. You know, he's asking me for this discount. I priced it really fairly. And he said to me, he's like, Jennifer, he's like, don't you know how to work with procurement people? He said, he's going to ask you for 50% discount. You're going to tell him no discount. He's going to come back and ask you for 40% discount. You're going to say no discount. He's going to come back again and ask for 25% discount. He said, you're going to give him 5%. He said, he's going to come back and ask for discount again. He said, and then you settle on 10. He said, if you have not added 10% buffer for negotiation onto the price of your contract, he said, that's a learning lesson for you. And to this day, you know, that happened nearly 20 years ago. I still remember that there are certain KPIs, especially with some organizations, that procurement is expected that they have to negotiate on the price. And it is quite typical that you do get an email coming back saying, great, we want to go with you. We want a discount.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I wouldn't say anything different. I agree. It's I shouldn't be telling you all these secrets, but it's true.
Well, I think it's important because we have a lot of women who are just starting out, and it can be super overwhelming if you have never done this, that it can be really, really overwhelming. So we have, sometimes with regular proposals, we price a little higher than we're expecting our cost to be. Is this a good practice for tenders as well? Are you pricing are you taking into account your costs and maybe giving yourself 10% on top of that? Or are you giving yourself a profit margin? Because remember, as business owners, there are a lot of costs that you need to take into consideration. There is the cost of your running your business. So that's everything from your trade license to your insurance policies to your visa costs, to all of those sorts of things, the systems, the software, everything you need to run your business, that adds up to a lot of money. Your staff, your salaries, all of these different sorts of things. So you need to make sure that it's going to be more than a little higher, because as a business, we're in business to make money. Everybody's in business to make money. And so you want to be able to look at that and to be able to come up with the price that is going to have a profit margin, that is going to make money. And also as well, remember that you need to account for paying yourself. You know, don't work for free, because I know some entrepreneurs will take contracts because they want to have a contract to have that customer on their client list, and they will work for free themselves because they won't see themselves as a cost. Okay, so she's saying if our costs are 100 dirhams an hour, we usually quote 120 to allow a margin where we can negotiate. Again, I think that comes down to you and what is the going rate on the market. For me, I wouldn't be happy just to be making 20 dirhams an hour on top of that. I think you need to look at that and see where you can price that will be fair, that the potential customer will be happy with, but will also give you a profit as well, because you need to make money.
In some cases, I want to say something, Jen, here. In some cases, you might want to enter, let's say there is a certain need in a company that you have been approached for. And then you feel that, you know, if you provide some flexibility, you know for a fact that there will be other projects that will come your way from this company in the future. So really, it's about assessing any project that comes your way. What does it mean for you? At the beginning, in some cases, you might actually have to work for free. I'm not saying this is a good practice.
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
But maybe that will help you to have a foot in a certain company where more work will be coming your way because of this, you know, initial support that you provided. Because I'm going to tell you also the other side of the story. yes, like Jen mentioned, the procurement people, we all have pressure from our companies to provide, savings and to ensure we protect the company's money. And we have KPIs that we are all assessed on. So it's important that you understand both sides, that in some cases, if you are really providing a certain software that is special to this company, and you are able at a certain project to start with a very small margin, and then moving forward you get more projects, then think futuristic, think bigger than just one project that you are entering into.
Yeah. But I will say a word of caution with that as well, because some companies can be a little bit naughty and will try and get your price at cost by saying, oh, it'll be so great, it will open up so many doors by working with us, and when you have us on your client list, you'll be able to get so many clients. 20 years of being a business owner, I still hear this. And so you need to be very careful about that. If you're just starting out, absolutely, you want to have a couple of big name customers on your name, but be very careful about that as well, because that is sometimes just one of the negotiation tactics that will be used to be able to get you to lower your price. Now, following up on the question about costing, so she had mentioned, she said by cost, she meant on top of the usual expected profit margin. So maybe her costs are 50 dirhams and she's adding another 50 for profit. And then she is adding maybe an extra 20 on top of that to allow for negotiation. If that's the case and that's what you're doing, that's fine. But make sure that you have added into your pricing a profit for you to make money from. Because at the end of the day, you want to have money in your bank account. You don't want to have your bank account in negative numbers. Any other questions about that? Who's got questions about pricing, tenders, proposals? No. One person has asked, what is a bond that we were speaking about? Do you want to cover that, Diana, or do you want me to?
Go ahead, please, Jen.
Okay, so you have a number of different bonds. You can have a performance bond, you can have a bid bond, and those bonds, so a bid bond is something that they ask you when you're putting together a proposal in the beginning to go and purchase a bid bond. So that is basically meaning that you are showing your commitment to putting together a proposal. And typically those bid bonds range anywhere from 1 up to 10% of the value of what it is that you are putting forward. What that is you go to your bank. Any of the banks around here know how to do that, and you give them the money. So they actually hold the money in a separate account, give you a piece of paper, and then you then take that piece of paper and you give it to the company to basically go and confirm that you are taking part in the bid. And the reason why they do that is they want your commitment to go and take part in submitting your documents for the proposal. And if you don't put in a proposal, you run the risk of losing the money. The performance bond is something that they ask for. Again, it's the same thing. It's typically about 10% of the overall value of the contract that you are delivering. And they ask, again, to have that in the form of a bond. It's kept in the bank. It is kind of like a security. Somebody's saying, is it kind of like a security deposit? Kind of, except if there is a dispute or if they feel that you haven't delivered, that then they will call on that bond and they will ask to have money taken off of that bond as compensation. Now, oftentimes, historically, these were used for big construction projects. And you see that that makes sense for big construction projects or infrastructure projects, that they want to have that security that that company is actually going to go and deliver. But it has been used for all sorts of things, from providing computer software to TVs to services. And that can be, for a small business, that can be very crippling. And I actually had security deposits, the bid bonds, performance bonds in the very early years of my business. And I actually had to go and take money. I had to borrow money or take money out of the business account and deposit it into an account. So just a word of warning, if you do that, if you are bidding for contracts to do that, your money can be put aside for a very long time. You get no interest and you get charged every month that the bank goes and keeps that money put aside. So I like to negotiate hard on that. I don't like bid bonds and performance bonds, especially for services companies. There are other ways that you can structure a contract to prevent you from having bonds. Any other questions on that? If not, we might, for once, finish up a little bit early. But before we do, I have our standard UN Women, NAMA Women Advancement polls, which I would be very, very, very grateful if everybody could fill in, just to let us know how you feel about procurement and tenders now. If you feel that Diana and I have increased your knowledge and understanding, or if you still feel that there's questions that are unanswered. And if you feel that there's questions that are unanswered, please, jump in the chat box, tell us what else we can answer for you. Diana, would you mind unsharing your screen for a second? Because I have another slide, which has just been sent to me, which I would like to share as well. And that is for a session which is going to be happening this week for anybody who is an Arabic speaker. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that slide now. Everybody see that? Okay, so for all of you who are Arabic speakers, there is a session this week on Thursday about understanding VAT in the UAE. So this is really important. If you are an Arabic speaker and maybe you have questions around VAT, finance and accounting, this is absolutely a session you do not want to miss, because the rules around VAT and taxation are very strict in this country. And so it's important that you understand what the requirements are, what the thresholds are, how you can go and get yourself VAT registered, or maybe, let's say, for example, you've fallen below the threshold, how you can get yourself deregistered for VAT. That's very important. So if I could please just ask everybody, we've only had about half of you do the polls. I would be really grateful if you would be able to do that. I've been asked as well if we're going to do the VAT session in English. Yes, we will. We have done a VAT and finance system in English already, and we have planned to do another one as well in English later this year as well. And I love this as well. Liliana has said this, where she said everything is negotiable. And 100%, sorry, Diana, speaking on the business side. I agree. And Diana will say this from their side as well, that everything is negotiable when it comes to contracts. And my view is, the worst that they can say is no. I try to negotiate with Diana and Diana might just say, no, sorry, Jen, nice try, but no, this is the terms of Mars and this is the way we want to do it. But it's really useful to be able to have that anyways, to know that you can negotiate. If I could just ask my colleague Maya, a few people are asking about how to register for this session on Thursday. Maya, if you just wouldn't mind popping into the chat box the link. There we go. Wonderful, Maya's done that. Yes, and we have been asked for a negotiation skills workshop, and we do have one of those coming up as well. We've got you covered. Anything and everything that as an entrepreneur you need, we have thought about, and we have all sorts of different things coming up. But we thought that this is really important because one of the goals of UN Women in NAMA is we want to be able to give all of you more access to opportunities in the market. And to be able to do that, it's really useful for you to understand how the procurement process works, what companies are looking for. Now, Diana has gone and covered the perspective from a company, and a company perspective is going to be very different than a government entity. So we are also working on a government entity to get them to come and speak about their procurement process, what that looks like to help you understand as well. So they will have a slightly different process, but a lot of the tips that Diana has shared today are universal for all companies, you know. And as I said as well, make sure that you have all your documents on a file on your computer. Make sure that you are filling in the form exactly as requested. And when you do your proposal as well, that you are following exactly what it is that they've asked for. Don't go off and provide them with something else, because oftentimes that will lead to you being excluded. Diana, is there anything you want to add to that? I would say those would be my 3 takeaways.
I 100% agree with you. Thank you, Jen, for summarizing so good. I mean, thank you, everybody. I'm very happy to have participated in this session. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'm happy to help, really, in any way possible. So reach out to us. Let us know what you want to know more, if something was not covered, actually.
Amazing. Diana, thank you so much on behalf of UN Women and NAMA Women Advancement. Thank you so much for your time and for supporting women entrepreneurs in the UAE. And to all of you, thank you so much for participating today. We've had a few people saying, how can I contact Diana? Diana, I think the best way will be on LinkedIn. Is that right?
Exactly. I'm on LinkedIn. I'll write my name. So please get in touch, guys.
Yeah. So I think you're going to have lots of connection requests over LinkedIn today. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you to everybody today for your participation and coming. And I hope this is going to inspire you to want to go out and apply for more tenders, to find them, to make those connections, to make those contacts. Make sure that you register for the UN Women-Owned Business Directory. Maya has shared the link with you. So please make sure that you do that so we can help you grow your businesses as well. So thank you, Diana. Thank you, everyone else. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.